Hi friends, I'm Maya, trainer with AQUA Real Estate, bringing you another training video. Today is the opening video for NWMLS Form 22B, Sale of Property Contingency Addendum. Starting off, we will begin with an introduction of Form 22B by explaining why you will use it. Then cover the first clause of the form. Lastly, we will finish up discussing items that require the seller's consent. So, what exactly is a home sale contingency? The home sale contingency is a contingency that basically is the buyer asking the seller this question. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can I ask you to do a little favor? I want to buy your house, but I need you to give me some time to sell my house before I can purchase yours. I also don't want to risk losing my earnest money deposit should I be unable to sell mine. In order for me to have funds to purchase your property, I need time to not only find a buyer for my property, but also time to close the transaction with my buyer too. Once this transaction has closed, I can close with you on your property. While that may sound like a simple request, it's actually a huge risk for the seller to accept an offer with this type of contingency. There are so many moving parts and questions to ask as a seller and listing agent. So, before we dive into the home sale contingency, it's not an exaggeration when I say NWMLS Form 22B is the single most complicated form you will use as a real estate agent. If you are not familiar with use of this form, especially if this is your first time using the form, do not rely only on the information you're going to get from this training. Study the form, read the NWMLS Forms Manual, watch AQUA Use Form 22B video series, and then get help using this form from your designated or managing brokers. Let's dive into paragraph 1. In this training, I will focus on the perspective of the buyer. We will discuss as if you are writing an offer. Start by entering the address of the contingent property, the property your buyer will be selling. In this case, 326 East Castro Street in Conception, California. After the address is entered, you will need to fill in the length of time the contingency will last. Let's say 30 days. The default is 45 days if you were to leave it blank. It's important to note the 30-day period doesn't mean the buyer only gets 30 days total time. The 30-day time frame gives the buyers 30 days solely to find a buyer for the contingent property. Closing time to close the home they are selling is not included. Additional time to close the contingent transaction is allowed and outlined further on in the form. The contingency protects the buyer. If the buyer does not find a buyer for their home by the end of the contingency deadline, the buyer is entitled to receive a full refund for their earnest money deposit. The buyer's home may or may not already be listed for sale. If not listed, the buyer makes a promise to the seller that within 5 days following mutual acceptance, the buyer will list their property for sale in the MLS. While the contingency allows the buyer to sell a home in any state in the USA, the seller may be hesitant to take a contingent offer outside the local market. The real estate market outside the local area is likely to be very different than here at home. It's hard for the seller to know if the buyer's home is priced correctly or if it will even sell. So most listing agents will give advice to their sellers not to accept such an offer. The last topic of today is items that require seller consent. Now we can move on to the second clause. There are 2 requirements for the transaction that can only be authorized with the seller's consent. First, the buyer cannot accept an offer on their listing that they are selling if the buyer's buyer is also including a home sale contingency. This creates a double-layered contingency. Second, the buyer cannot accept an offer on their listing that is closing less than 30 days or more than 60 days. A short or long close may be too much of a hardship to the seller. The buyer must first get the seller's permission if they want to accept any offer with differing terms. Should the buyer enter into an agreement with another buyer and include unauthorized terms without the seller's permission, then the seller may choose to terminate the agreement, hold the buyer in default, and retain the buyer's earnest money. So be diligent and make sure your clients understand these terms.
Be sure to check out our other great training videos inside AQUA University. Hey there! Are you watching our training videos but not yet an AQUA agent? We would love to have you. Our 100% commission model, world-class training systems, technology and marketing make AQUA the coolest and fastest growing brokerage in the Northwest. Go to our website, getaqua.com/careers to learn more. Join the club.